Hello everyone, welcome to Deep Dive. There was a young woman named Ayesha living in a bustling city where dreams were sold cheap and voices were easily drowned. From a young age, she had been told she wasn't good enough, too quiet, too ordinary, too average, to make a real mark in the world. Her parents, though loving, had limited expectations. Her teachers praised her only when she exceeded impossible standards, and her friends often mocked her ambitions as unrealistic. Each day, she walked through crowded streets, blending into the sea of faces, feeling like a shadow rather than a human being with worth and potential. Inside her, a storm raged. She wanted to scream to break free, but the world had convinced her silence was safer than defiance. She took low-paying jobs, smiled politely to bosses who undervalued her, and nodded along to people who took her ideas without credit. On the outside she seemed content, inside, she felt invisible. One evening, after another long day of being dismissed, she sat alone in her tiny apartment, scrolling through social media, and stopped on a post that read, "Your worth is not defined by what others think of you. Only you can set your value." The words struck her like lightning. She realized she had spent her life giving away her energy, her time, and her talents to a world that didn't recognize her, and worse, she had believed that was all she deserved. For the first time she began to question herself. Why had she allowed others to define her? Why had she accepted less than she was capable of? She remembered the drawings she made as a child, the stories she wrote in notebooks she never showed anyone, the dreams she whispered to herself late at night. They were all pieces of her worth she had hidden away. That night she made a silent vow she would no longer hide, she would no longer shrink herself to fit the expectations of others. The journey ahead was unclear, terrifying, but for the first time, a spark of belief flickered within her. She realized that knowing her worth was the first step toward demanding the life she deserved. The next morning, she woke up with a new determination. She applied for a creative internship she had once deemed out of her league. She reached out to a mentor she had admired but never dared to approach. She even started writing publicly online, sharing her thoughts and stories despite the fear of criticism. Slowly the responses came, messages from strangers who resonated with her words, a small recognition at work, and an inner strength that surprised even her. But the real change wasn't external, it was in the way she carried herself. When someone dismissed her, she didn't crumble. When someone undervalued her, she didn't shrink. She realized that knowing her worth meant she no longer needed validation from others. It was a quiet power, invisible yet undeniable, and it began to shift her life in ways she had never imagined. By the end of the first year, Ayesha had built a portfolio that reflected her talents, had found supportive friends who encouraged her growth, and had begun to attract opportunities that matched her energy and vision. She understood now that life didn't owe her recognition, but her worth demanded action, and she was ready to claim it. And as you watch this story, remember your worth is not up for negotiation. Don't let anyone decide what you deserve. If you feel inspired by Ayesha's journey, hit that subscribe button because the next chapter will take you even deeper into the power of standing tall and owning your value. Months turned into years and Ayesha's life began to transform in ways that she had once only dreamed of. She faced setbacks. Of course, opportunities lost, harsh criticisms, and moments when old fears crept in. But each time she reminded herself of her value, she realized that knowing her worth didn't mean life would be easy. It meant she no longer settled for less than she deserved, and that alone made her unstoppable. One day she was invited to speak at a local seminar about young entrepreneurs. Standing in front of a room full of people, her hands shook and her voice wavered. But then she remembered the nights she had doubted herself, the dreams she had almost buried, and the promise she had made to never shrink again. She took a deep breath and began speaking, her words flowing with clarity and passion. She shared her journey, the years of invisibility, the moments of fear, the struggle to recognize her own value. She spoke about how knowing her worth transformed not only her career but her relationships, her confidence, and her mindset. The audience listened, captivated by her authenticity. She noticed eyes watering, nods of agreement, and even some smiles that seemed to reflect relief, as if her story gave permission for others to embrace their own worth. After the seminar, a young woman approached her, tears in her eyes, saying, "I've been living my life for others, never believing I deserved more. Listening to you, I think I can start believing in myself." Ayesha smiled, realizing this was the true reward, the ripple effect of self-worth. She had not only changed her life, she had begun inspiring others to reclaim their value. Back in her apartment that evening, Ayesha reflected on her journey. The girl who once felt invisible had become someone who commanded respect, who spoke her truth, and who refused to compromise her dreams. She understood that life would always present challenges, but the difference now was that she had an unshakable foundation, the knowledge of her own worth. And this is the lesson for everyone watching: knowing your worth changes the way the world interacts with you, but even more importantly, it changes how you interact with yourself. It gives you courage when fear knocks, clarity when confusion clouds, and strength when obstacles appear. If there's one thing Ayesha's story teaches, it's this: you are valuable, capable, and deserving of a life that reflects your true potential. Don't wait for validation from others. Stand tall, set boundaries, and pursue your dreams relentlessly. And if this story inspired you even a little, make sure to subscribe to the channel because here, we share stories and lessons that help you recognize your own power, embrace your worth, and live the life you were meant to live. Your journey starts now. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise.